Hi. Okay, so this for me is the last video in the romantic poetry series. Depending on how you've looked at it, it could be anywhere in the series. But we are in wave two now, and this is Lord Byron. This is one of his longer works. Now, you're only seeing a small piece of what he did. This part that's in your textbook or the part that I've included on this video is only a teeny tiny little piece. The actual book was about that big. It was a full length book, and it was a travel journal of all the places he had gone. And he didn't actually expect this one to be as big as it was. He'd traveled around and seen a lot of stuff, and he was a young man who had potentially had quite a bit of money, and he decided he was going to just jot down some poetry about what he'd seen. And in the process of doing this, he was also writing other stuff that he thought was a much better quality. However, when he got back home and he goes to his publisher in London, he says, "Here's my stuff. Here's what I've done." And the guy's like, "Nah, no thanks. I don't like it." He said, "What else have you got?" And Byron's like, "Well, I've got this poetry stuff that I've been working on about my travels." And the publisher loved it. He said, "Okay, let's try this." And let me tell you, it sold out overnight. It was a huge sensation. Byron said, "I woke up one morning and found myself famous." This was the piece that made him famous. Byron was also the first celebrity in England, the first person to be followed around by paparazzi. Now, granted, we didn't have the same kind of cameras back then, but people did. They followed him around. They wanted him at their parties. He was Mr. Popularity. And it didn't hurt that he was stunningly good looking. Okay, so this also is the best example of romantic poetry, the idea of a romantic. And again, we're not saying love and kisses and I love you and stuff like that. No, that's not the kind of romantic we're talking about. We're talking about go outside and see nature and enjoy the water and the rocks and the mountains and the trees and green and sunshine, all of that. Fight the man, think for yourself, be your own person, start a revolution, that kind of stuff. That's romantic. And if you can imagine it happening at Woodstock, it's romantic. All right, so we're going to start looking here. Byron is in the beginning here about to say goodbye to his homeland, and he was about to start his journey. This particular excerpt comes from the very beginning of the book. Now, the first thing I need to tell you is what this means, okay? Child literally just means young. You notice I mark the E out? Just an old-fashioned way of saying child, or spelling child. So young Harold's road trip. A pilgrimage is simply a journey you take, generally referring to a religious experience. Like the pilgrims that we talk about at Thanksgiving, that was their religious journey to come to a new world where there was freedom of religion. Okay, that's what the word pilgrim and pilgrimage means, a journey. So this is young Harold's journey, his road trip. All right, this is, I kid you not, this is probably a nerd moment for me, one of my favorite lines in all of the stuff I teach all year long. There is a pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on a lonely shore. A rapture is an overwhelming sense of perfection. It's just a happiness that seeps down into your soul. There are group where none intrude. Okay, group, that's a kind of an irony because you would expect groups of people where nobody intrudes. That's an odd group. By the deep sea and music in its roar. Okay, so there are a group where none intrude by the deep sea. So he's thinking, I feel like I have company when I'm alone with the sea. The sea is my company. I love not man the less, but nature more. Now this really does explain Byron a lot. Byron loved women. He loved parties, but he was not a huge fan of people, if that makes sense. I've often said to myself that I like animals more than I like people. There are some of us who just don't like groups of people, and Byron's one of them. He's like, it's not that I don't like man. He said, but I really do like nature more. From these are interviews in which I steal from all I may be or have been before, to mingle with the universe and feel what I can never express yet cannot conceal. What he's saying is these interviews, meaning his time with nature, with the ocean. He says, which I steal. Okay, I steal time away to be with the ocean. From all I may be or have been before, to mingle with the universe and feel what I can never express yet cannot conceal. He's like, I can never quite express it properly, but I also can't conceal it. And he's talking about his joy, his love of being outside, being in nature, being with the water, all of it. That is what he's living for. Now, he does go in here on the second stanza into specifically talking about the ocean and the water. He says, roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll. And he was referring to the waves rolling. 10,000 fleets sweep over you in a vein. Fleets, ships, 10,000 ships sweep over you in vain, meaning they do nothing. Okay? You're never going to be conquered. This is unfortunately rather a sad thing, and the fact that this was written in the late 1700s and early 1800s, and it was a problem then, kind of hurts my heart. It says, man marks the earth with ruin. His control stops with the shore. At that time, in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, man's control of the ocean probably wasn't nearly as what it is now. Man's control could stop at the shore. We could control land. We couldn't control the shore. Unfortunately, now we're harming the earth with ruin, both on the water and on the land. Upon the watery sea, the wrecks are all your deed, nor remains a shadow of man's ravage, save his own. Okay, time out. Upon the watery sea, the wrecks are all your deed, nor remains a shadow of man's ravage, save his own. So what he's saying is, upon the waters, you control. The water controls. Okay, the water will not be taken away. It will not be outdone or conquered by man. And then it says a shadow of man's ravage. Okay, because the man cannot at that point in time control the ocean. And then he says, save his own, meaning his own ravage, man's ravage. In other words, man's downfall. And this is where he talks about if a man were to drown or sink in the water, poof, gone. And it's dark and it's depressing, but it's also kind of fascinating in that the ocean is so big, so overwhelming, that it could just swallow a man, just whoop, gone. He says, when for a moment, like a drop of rain, he sinks into your depths, with a bubbling groan, without a grave, uncoffined and unknown. The man doesn't have a grave, the man won't have a coffin, and nobody will know he died. He will just go, whoop. That's it. He's gone. The ocean is that big, that powerful, that deep, and that unknown. Okay, so the last one. Oh, I have loved thee, ocean, and my joy of youthful sports was on your breast to be born like your bubble onward. From a boy, time out. Bubble onward. Okay, so he's talking about the fact that this joy of youthful sports on your breast, meaning on the water, okay? He's calling the waters ocean and waves, the surface of it as its breast. He's talking about how he loved to play in that water when he was a boy. I played with thy waves. They to me were a delight. And if the rough sea made them a terror, it was a pleasing fear. Okay. So yeah, I mean, the ocean is terrifying. It can be scary. And I mean, you don't know, there are undercurrents, there are things down in there, there's seaweed to get caught up in, there's all kinds of stuff. But he didn't care. He loved the waves. He loved the ocean. And he said, even if it scared me, it was a happy fear. It was an exciting fear. He said, for I was, as it were, a child of yours, a child of those waves. And I trusted your waves, far and near. Now, this is another one of my favorite lines. He says, and I laid my hand upon your mane as I do here. He's calling it a mane, like a horse's mane. He's like, I lay my hand right here on the top of you, and I feel you like you would lay your hand on a horse's mane. So you literally have a vision here of this man who loves the ocean, loves the water, and he's currently putting his hand on the water right there. So this would continue on for many more pages. He would travel around and visit different places, and he would write this poetry in this very same style about all the places he went. Now, obviously, we don't cover all of that, but if you're ever interested, it is simply called Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. I can't tell you I've read the whole thing. I like what I have read, but after a while, I got kind of bored. Sorry, Lord Byron. All right, look up to the top again. We're going to do some picky parts, and then we'll stop. Woods, okay. First letter, first rhyme. Shore. Intrude, that doesn't rhyme. Roar does rhyme with shore. More, also. Steal, another one. Before, back to be. Feel again, conceal again. ABC, BB, DB, DB. We have almost no real sequence here. He's got several rhyming words, like several B's and D's in here, enough to give the poem a feel of rhyme without having an actual set rhyme scheme. Look at him and see what he does down here. Roll, vein, control, see, remains, rhymes with that, or supposed to rhyme with vein, own. There's no way that rhymes. I was trying to decide if he wanted that to rhyme with roll, and I really don't think it does. And then rain rhymes with vein, grown and own, unknown and own. So again, he's got FH, FHH, same as here, BD, BDD. He's got a system, different rhyme, different rhyme, different rhyme. Then he starts this sequencing. Same. Well, that's not the same, is it? He starts his sequencing here. HF, HH, DB, DD. It's similar. He's got a style, but it's not exactly a set thing. Which, if you know anything about Lord Byron, you know that was one thing he was not a fan of. He was not a fan of rules. If there was a rule out there, Lord Byron would break it. Okay. That is the end of it, and I will see you guys on the other side.